She has, I think, 3 social platforms. The last one is Journey of a Lotus. She has her own podcast and she talks about everything trauma. And I believe that she's paired with her friend Ada Andrade.
Andrade.
Andrade. And it's just been a blast. It's been a blast to kind of like, you know, follow her journey and be connected with her. She has been a great support for me. I've had days where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do my website. And I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And she has been totally open to having conversations with me. And we've been connected. So we're soul sisters. So at some point when I go to California, I'm going to see Teresa and Kaylee as well, because Kaylee is back. Kaylee was my first guest here on my podcast. But anyway, I'm doing a little rambling, but I had to formally introduce my friend here, Teresa. So Teresa, tell everyone who you are. If you want to reiterate what I just said, which is fine, talk to my people. Let's talk to people here.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me. I'm so blessed to be here. It was a pleasure working with you last time when we did our Instagram live. I really had lots of fun doing that. And yeah, I remember when you reached out, you were like, hey, do you want to do an Instagram live? And I was like, you know what? Okay, sure. Why not? You know, and it was great. We talked about anxiety and I think we talked a little bit about depression too. But It was a great segment, and I'm glad that you started your podcast and that we can connect like this and continue to educate our community about trauma and other topics that you've discussed. So a little bit about Iremia. So you mentioned like, you know, that you kind of like the, you know, how I came about that. I was actually, I was kind of playing with names and I didn't want just a regular, you know, and I wanted something unique, something that was going to like stand out and people were going to recognize and it was going to call people. And so it actually is Iremia. It's a Greek term and it's spelled differently. And what it means is it means serene, calm. And I chose that word because that's kind of like a reflection of who I am, my presence when people come into the therapy room. And then just walk into my office, they automatically just feel like that sense of calmness, or just like it's so therapeutic in here. You can just smell the lavender and just I have a meditation music playing, so they just feel like a complete sense of just calmness the moment they walk in. And that's what I wanted to kind of put out there for everyone when they come into therapy. So yeah, and then my husband actually came up with he was looking through Greek words that was a reflection of what I was saying in English. So he's like, well, why don't, you know, here are some words. And we were kind of playing with them. And so I came up with that one.
Is he from Greek? Is he Greece?
No.
Okay.
He was just like, you know what? Like, you need something unique. He's like, you can't have an English name. And I was like, okay, I guess, you know, like, show me what you got.
Love
so it was, yeah. So it was just like a lot of playing around with that. But my practice, I'm in private practice. I've been in private practice for about 9 months. I opened my practice officially in December of last year. And I'm doing really great. And I see, I love what I do. I see a lot of clients. My practice is in Ventura, California. So kind of a Southern California area.
Great. Yeah. And you know, it's funny you mentioned the meaning of Iremia, because I have to say I agree with that 100%. It really does define the type of person that you are. It reflects that very well. When I first met you, you did bring some sort of calmness. And I remember when we did our first live video, I was so excited and I was pumped up, and anyone who knows me personally, that's just my energy. That's just how I am. And then you kind of came in and you started talking about anxiety, and all of a sudden that I don't know, I guess that jitteriness that I had, it was just like, oh, okay. I love the way her voice sounds, and she's just so calm. So I definitely think that was on point. That's the name for your business, and you're going to thrive, which is going back to thrive at Iremia constantly. Yes. So I'm excited for you and all the work that you're doing. So if you guys, you're welcome. So if you guys heard my episode from last week, I talked a little bit about my journey with getting pregnant for the first time, and well, not necessarily getting pregnant for the first time, but having my daughter, becoming a mom for the first time, and really just experiencing some anxiety that I never had experienced my whole life. And so we talked a little bit about what what those symptoms looked like and how it affected me and how I was able to get through that. And since we are still talking about anxiety, I wanted to have Teresa join in and talk about her own personal experiences, but also educate us on somatic symptoms, the body and how it stores memories from trauma, and how a trauma really impacts us. And of course, at the end, we're going to be leaving you guys with some effective coping skills that will be beneficial not only to you but your mental health, and it will hopefully it will help you through this process. So Teresa, talk to us about anxiety, or I mean, if you want to start with your personal experiences and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I kind of want to just bounce back from where you mentioned on your last podcast about your own pregnancy. And I remember when I heard it and I saw your picture on Instagram, I was just kind of like, whew, wow, okay. So I had a lot of anxiety, and that's because I had my own trauma with pregnancy, and I had a miscarriage. And so it was really a traumatic experience for me. And so it still initially brings up a lot of anxiety just because that's something I haven't worked through. I've worked through other stuff, but with the miscarriage, it's just kind of just been there. And it's, I think I've come more to an acceptance of what's happened, but it still doesn't mean that I don't have a reaction, a trigger. When I get triggered, I definitely have a somatic reaction. And for me, it's just kind of like I feel that pressure in my chest, and then I feel like tingling in my arms, in my hands, and I feel lightheaded. So those are signs of my own anxiety that comes up, and something I had experienced when I was listening to your podcast. And I could just hear the excitement in your voice, and I was so happy for you. And at the same time, I was just so sad for myself. And so there's those mixed emotions that come up, and then at the same time, it's like feeling the anxiety. So, and then getting irritable, because for me with anxiety, I get really irritable. And so there's just like all these mixed emotions when I was listening to your podcast. But I just want to say, like, you made it sound so beautiful, and just like something that was such a blessing, and something that you would wish for everyone, every female, every mother, every female that wants to be a mother to experience.
Yes, and I appreciate your honesty, because you and I had a conversation and you said I was triggered, and immediately I felt super bad. I said, oh my gosh, I did not mean to trigger anyone. I simply was just kind of having you guys walk through this journey with me and talk about that time. And I know that is definitely something that I know that you said you're still kind of working through. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast even more so, because you and I said, hey, let's talk about this. Let's be real. Let's be raw. Because these are things, again, that I've mentioned before in my podcast, and I would continue to talk about, that we don't talk about openly. We should, because I think that's what brings that connection for someone that says, hey, I'm there, or I've been there, and I can totally relate. And it can bring maybe some sense of comfort, or maybe answers that person maybe that person never thought that they needed until that time, or that moment when they heard something through, any of our podcasts. So I really do appreciate that. And then I shared my own personal experience with my miscarriage, because I had a miscarriage. I did not mention that in my last episode, but my first pregnancy was a miscarriage. And that was something very difficult for me to experience, because I had no idea that, one, you never think that you're just going to lose the baby. You're thinking, I'm excited, I'm happy, we're pregnant, and this is actually, it's actually happening. And so the thought of the baby passing away or something happening never really crosses my mind, or never crossed my mind at the time. And when I go and, really just, and when I go for a doctor's appointment and the doctor's like, there's no heartbeat, I mean, your whole world just kind of just breaks down. It shuts down, and you don't know the answers for that time. You don't know the answers for that happening, but it really just crushes your world. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and your story, I don't want to make this about me, but I certainly want to hear your story, because I know that's something I haven't heard before. Let's talk about, how was that for you?
Well, I think for me, I went into a quick trauma response. So it was, when I had heard the news, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not worthy of a child. So it makes sense. So my own self-worth issues came into play, my own negative core beliefs about myself. And I was like, all right, so what do we got to do? So I went into just like that, I compartmentalized my own feelings. I pushed them aside, the devastation. And then it was like, what do I have to do now? And so it's like, go get blood work. And then it's like, okay, so what about the baby? Like, what's going to happen? It's like, well, it can come out naturally, or we schedule a surgery. And so it was kind of like going to get the blood work, driving home. And it was more like, how am I going to break this news to my husband? Like, it's going to be devastating for him. And so, but I think the most traumatic experience within all of that had to have been the hospital visit, because I had went into the ER with severe pain, the most horrific pain I'd ever experienced. And I was just bleeding nonstop for hours and hours and hours. And it was just consistent. They wouldn't take me back to the ER room. I was still waiting in the waiting room. I literally was in the bathroom on just like the toilet and just there, just waiting, because nothing was holding the blood, the amount of blood that was coming out. And so that, I think, was more traumatic for me than the news itself, and then what happened back in the emergency room once I did get back. Because anybody that knows a miscarriage or has had a miscarriage and it came out naturally understands what comes with that, and all the emotional part, and then me trying to take care of myself emotionally, and then looking at my husband and trying to take care of his emotions, and seeing kind of like how checked out he was. I mean, that was hard for me. So here I am trying to like take care of everybody, and then also like trying to, make sure like I'm telling the doctors this and that and the nurses, and just, it was just really horrific. And so I took that with me, and I still think about that. But the one thing that helps me through this is I remember that the next day my niece had came over to visit me, and she just sat with me and brought me breakfast, and we just sat, and she just hugged me. She didn't like say like any words. It was just so beautiful. And then my dad came over too the next day, and it just like, he just sat with me and he just talked. And it was the most beautiful thing that anybody can do. And I remember my godson hugging me after maybe a few days or that weekend when I saw him, and he was just like embracing me. No words, no I'm sorry, no nothing. It was just, I love you, Nina. And that was it. And so I hold on to that. And I think that's kind of what can get somebody through a traumatic experience, is when they have these protective factors in their lives that can hold them in a place of feeling safe, in a place of feeling loved. Unfortunately, not everybody has that, but we try to explore when we're working with trauma, and which ways can we help somebody identify some protective factors in their life.
Love that. I loved everything that you said. I'm actually just speechless, because I've started kind of thinking about, some experiences that I've had with trauma. And, often, people want to know, with your own mouth, or like with your own words, what happened, the details of that trauma. And they want to console you, but at the same time, they also want to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And sometimes you just don't have the words. There are no words to describe what you've experienced. Sometimes you just need that person to sit down and lay with you, embrace you, and that's it. That's all you need. You don't want to be interrogated, or asked any questions, or you don't want anyone talking to you about it. You just want to be. And you really emphasize exactly what that should look like for many people, especially because we live in a society where people are constantly experiencing trauma, and some people just don't know they don't know how to embrace that, or they don't know what to do when someone has experienced that. So I think that was definitely one of the most important parts here in this podcast. I think it's just letting people know that when you have someone in your personal life that experiences any traumatic situation, just be with them, just sit there with them and embrace them, and understand that at the time or at that moment, they cannot talk to you about how they feel or answer questions that they themselves don't even know what to say, because
Right.
it's a shocking, it's really just shocking to them, and they're responding the best way that they can for the moment.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, that reminds me of kind of like what stress is and how stress impacts the body, and how that like correlates with anxiety. And so when we think about stress, we think about like that is something, it's a response to like exhaustion, to feeling like overworked, to feeling fatigue. And it's you know, when you have your mental like your mind is just kind of like wiped out because you're just done for the day. You know, that's what stress is. And how does that impact our body? The way that impacts our body is because it has to do with our stress response system, which, you know, kind of goes back to like, well, what is anxiety? And so when we think about anxiety, anxiety is a response to a perceived threat. So it's just like, uh-oh, something bad's going to happen. You know, that's our automatic thought. It's just like this feeling you get in your body, and this thought that you have, like something bad's going to happen. Even though you may cognitively know like nothing bad's going to happen, but your body's feeling something, and your body's feeling something for a reason.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what trauma is. And so when somebody experiences a trauma, it really has to do with the brain's inability to make sense of what just happened. And we think about like kids. Wait, my parents are getting a divorce? Yeah, I don't understand. I'm so confused. My parents are separating. I don't get it. I'm confused. You know, I was just abused right now. You know, I don't understand what just happened. It's like I remember this, and that. And so your brain is trying to make sense of what's happening. And so that's kind of like how we have trauma, stress, and anxiety just kind of interacting with each other. Did that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I was just going to say, jump into the somatic symptoms of what, how your body stores that memory, and how do you often kind of reacting from that fight, flight, freeze response, and
Mm-hmm.
and what people really need to know about anxiety. Because one of the things that I have lately, I've been actually called, you know, for services, and people have reached out to me, is because so many, especially, I mean, I'm going to go back to the kids. I know that we're all, as a society, we're all experiencing trauma and some sort of anxiety on some level. But
Mm-hmm.
most of what I'm hearing lately is so many kids, so many teens, overwhelmed with anxiety, and they just don't know how to shut their brains. They don't know how
Yeah.
to go to sleep at night, or how to disconnect or be in the present moment. That's why I'm a believer in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, because I
Mm-hmm.
love to teach mindfulness practices in the here and now and being present, and also a lot of grounding exercises or a lot of grounding techniques to help you really hone in your own skills through your five senses, which is your hearing and your seeing and your smelling and your tasting and your touching. Because we are so wired with anxiety that we forget. I mean, we don't even know how things taste, or sometimes we don't look at what's in front of us, or we don't pay attention to what we're hearing, or we don't even mindfully eat now. I mean, I think we eat
Oh yeah.
we eat on the
Mm-hmm.
go, right? Dunkin' on the go, McDonald's on the
Mm-hmm.
go. And so we're not even taking the time to stop and pay attention. So that's my approach when I'm working,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the kiddos that are experiencing high volume of anxiety. But I
Yeah.
know that you're also you know, I also know that this is your specialty. And so talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
talk to us about what those somatic symptoms look like, and
Yes.
how the body is constantly reacting through trauma and experiencing anxiety.
Yes. So anxiety is physiological. So those are the somatic symptoms, things you feel in your body. It's behavioral. So those are things that you do every day. And then you have the cognitive, which is more of just kind of like having those thoughts. And so we think about the physiological part of anxiety. The way that looks up in our bodies is going to be excessive sweating. Or you can go the opposite side and you can always like be cold, like you have cold fingertips, or your toes are cold. So there's this heat and then just cooling effect that your body can go up and down in. Shaking, trembling, that's also very common, that's seen in the body. Rapid like heartbeat, like you feel like either your heart's gonna pop out or you feel as if your heart is racing. That's another somatic reaction. One of the biggest things is GI issues. So when we're the gastrointestinal issues, stomach issues, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, acid reflux, GERD, like all of those are all anxiety related. And yes, we have a peak in these symptoms, but we also have a peak in mental health. So if we can reduce the mental health, we can definitely reduce those physiological symptoms. And then sometimes people complain of feeling like dizzy or lightheaded, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. That can definitely happen to the body just because you're not getting enough air in, or maybe you're getting too much where you're hyperventilating, and then to kind of top off that, panic attacks, right? So
Yeah.
that's something else. And those are all physiological things that happen to the body. Pain is another one. My back hurts, my shoulder hurts, my neck hurts. Just kind of like pain that you're feeling in your body. It's because there's so much stress that you're holding on to that it can't release because you are so constricted in all of that. Then we have some behavioral stuff, which can be like nail biting or biting objects, putting stuff in your mouth, shaking leg, kind of people that are very fidgety and overactive. That's also a behavioral response to anxiety. Fast talkers, like when my anxiety goes up, I can be like a really, really fast talker. Or it can be opposite, and people will just be like talking like very like monotone. And then you have things like that are a little bit more dangerous, which is like suicidal behaviors, cutting, suicide attempts, drug abuse, substance abuse, eating disorders, or what was the other thing I was going to say? Eating disorders, substance abuse, alcoholism, and addiction. So other forms of addictions as well, to kind of ease that anxiety. And that goes back to the need to control, because when your anxiety is high, you're feeling a loss of control.
Yeah.
And then you have the cognition part, which is having those irrational fears, like something bad is always going to happen. You can dissociate often, where you're not present because there's too much fear going on within your body. And so when that happens, you can't be present, and so you have to check out. And that kind of falls in hand with like difficulty concentrating, difficulty remembering, kind of like your own thoughts, because you're not really feeling present. And so you'll see that a lot in people that have high anxiety, and just kind of having like those cognitive distortions or cognitive, like those negative self beliefs about one. And like, I'm not worthy, I'm dumb, I'll never make it. I can never do anything right, just kind of like those feelings of worthless, and just feeling like you're just not good enough. You're unmotivated. You feel helpless, hopeless. So those are kind of like the physiological, behavioral, and cognitive responses that somebody has, like in an anxiety response. And you will see that a lot in trauma. When you talk about working with kids, one of the things that's overly diagnosed and overly medicated is ADHD in children. And we have learned that there's been a lot more research now that is actually, it's a trauma response. And so a child or a kid that has ADHD has experienced a trauma, severe trauma, and it's unresolved. And so that's going to look like overactiveness, hyperactivity, fidgetiness, yelling, anger, aggression, non-compliance. You're going to look at that difficulty concentrating, because when a child is wondering, geez, mom and dad, dad hit mom last night, or they're fighting again, or how am I going to eat today? Where am I going to get my food? Or if they're wondering about, being bullied at school, I can't do this, I can't do that. They can't concentrate at school. They can't learn. They don't have the capacity to. But this is not understood by a lot of teachers and a lot of people in the education system. So it is looked at as ADHD and it's overly medicated. But if we can work with kids on the behavioral part and where it originates from in the trauma, then we can definitely reduce those symptoms. I know that was a little side note, but I think that's important to say when we think about kids and ADHD.
I think everything you said was on point. It was definitely needed. And anyone that's listening now, I hope that you are able to hear what Teresa is saying, what we are saying, and especially when it comes to the kids, because there are just so many cases where the kids' needs are being undressed. They're not being dressed. Well, no, that's not what I meant.
Addressed.
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 Yeah, there's so many kids out there that their needs are not being addressed. And we definitely need to pay attention. You need to pay attention to the signs and symptoms, because there are kids that are hurting. There are kids that are suffering, and they're living in unhealthy environments. And as professionals, I think that that's our duty, to pay attention and to investigate a little bit more, or to help out the best that we can, so that we can try to reduce those symptoms, right?
Yes.
That's our goal. So yes. I love everything that you said. I love everything that you said. One of the things that come to my mind, is I've had a few car accidents, and every time for a few years, I would get in the car, and if my husband was driving and he got a little too close to another car, my body would freeze, and I would feel this panic come over me. All of a sudden, my neck was hurting me. I felt very tense. My heart was beating really fast. And sometimes I even, out of the intensity of how close he got to the car, I'll just kind of say out loud, stop, or wait, or pump the brake, because my body was reacting from all of the car accidents that I had been in. And he would look over at me and said, I'm not that close. And I just felt that we were that close, and he really wasn't that close, but it was that, I guess that physiology, concept that you talked about, as far as how your body reacts, your behavior, cognition, and maybe thinking about what has happened in those flashbacks come to play at that moment when I'm in the front seat in the car. So
let me tell you a little bit about how trauma is in the brain, and how it's in the body. So in the body, trauma is held on a cellular level. There's a lot of back and forth research on this, and beliefs and disbeliefs, but I'm a big believer in it, and I believe my clients, and I believe the research and everything I read on it. And so when we think about trauma in the body and how it's held at a cellular level, well, the body will hold and remember the traumatic event. And so what happens, so let's kind of like go to the brain. So what happens in the brain? When a trauma happens, there's these three areas in the brain that communicate with each other. You have the amygdala, and then that is your alarm system. And the alarm system is going to tell you, hey, stress, this is not okay, right? And then you have your hippocampus, which that is the area that kind of like, it holds the memories. When we're thinking about trauma, it's going to hold that memory of the event that happened. And then you have your prefrontal cortex, which is the part that kind of deals with like your responses, so like your behaviors and your emotions. Okay, so you have the three of them that need to communicate with each other. What happens in a trauma is that it's like jolted and it's on freeze. So it's stuck. So it's consistently going round and round, and they're trying to communicate with each other, but nothing has stopped it. And they're consistently in this like fire mode, alert. So it's like, it's saying alert, stress, and then it's saying, remember the car accident? And then it's saying, oh no, danger, danger, alert, stress, remember the car accident, danger, danger. So it's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's stuck in that. So that is trapped trauma. And that is what your body's holding on to. Sometimes your mind doesn't remember, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does. But right now we're kind of just talking about the trauma and remembering of that. And so that is why someone gets stuck in a situation where they're hyper vigilant, so they're always like on guard and wondering like something bad gonna happen, something bad gonna happen, you know, and they're in that state. So you're living in that state every single day. Normally, it's okay if you're out in the woods, you see a bear, and you have to run, right? Your adrenaline rushes, and you're like, I got to get out of here now, right?
Right.
And then you go to safety, and you're good, right? That's perfect, beautiful. But what happens when that occurs with you every single day of your life? That stress response is way up here, and you cannot regulate yourself. And that's what we're seeing in children and adults when they have unresolved trauma and they're not getting the help that they need. So can you imagine living in that fear every single day? That is scary.
I can imagine it because I lived in it for a few years until I actually had to process those car accidents and how it impacted me, and really learn to ground myself and use the skills that I know as a therapist that I give to my clients and really work through it. And so, you know, I know certainly that's not a way to live a healthy life, right? It's not joyful to feel trapped and feel stuck. And one of the things that I provide as a therapist is I do cognitive processing therapy, which a client talks about their trauma and we process their beliefs connected to that trauma and behaviors, and basically, you know, continue talking about it and challenging how we can change or help the client become their own therapist so that they can go ahead and resolve through those issues, and they can change their beliefs. Because if you have a certain set of beliefs that continue to keep you stuck in that trap, you're going to constantly be re-experiencing that trauma. So that was all excellent. Tell us if there's anyone listening right now and they might be experiencing some trauma in their lives. We're going to talk about some coping skills or ways that they can get through or break through this wall for them to get unstuck. What would you recommend and what would you suggest?
So I think the number one thing is trying to help somebody feel safe, because then when they're having an anxiety attack, they feel completely unsafe. So it's about containment and about getting their body to a place of just feeling relaxed and calm. The number one, which I'm not going to include this as a 3 because this is just a given, but the number one is going to be deep breathing as your best friend. People hear it all the time, but they don't realize the impact that it has on the body, because it's not just deep breathing, but it's also opening up, like visualizing, opening up your lungs and just like breathing in calmness and then blowing out the fear. And so I always tell my clients, imagine that the way to properly breathe is to breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower, and to purse your lips like you're sipping through a straw, and blow out like you're blowing a dandelion. And you want the little guys to go far, far away. So you're going to blow, 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 blow until you can't anymore. But it's also about visualization of, again, bringing in the calmness and then blowing out the fear. And that's really beneficial for people, especially that have high anxiety, because a lot of time they're like, and you don't want them to get into a state where they are hyperventilating, because then that you can pass out from that. So it's really about kind of just starting off with that deep breathing.
I have to interject for a second. Yeah. So I recently, because you and I are both a therapist, we know how important breathing is.
Yes.
Recently, I've met another mom, and she had just recently had a son, and I think he's now 8 months or 7 months. And she was talking to me about hypnobirthing and the visualization of when you are having a baby, and how do you get yourself calm in a calm state so that the pain doesn't overwhelm you. And she talked about breathing in and breathing out the rainbow colors. And I love that. I said, I'm going to try that with one of my clients, because I just happen to be working with a client right now who's going through some anxiety. And I said, and I recommended to this client, let's try to breathe in, and every time you breathe in, you breathe out each colors of each color of the rainbow, and kind of visualize a rainbow as you breathing out the colors. And I said, okay, this is a long shot. I've never tried this technique, or I've never suggested this. So I wanted to see if it worked. And so sure enough, I followed up, and that person said, yeah, this is amazing. I was able to calm myself and ground. You know, I've always inhaled, exhaled, but to actually visualize a rainbow or like colors, that really helped me stay grounded at that moment. And I was able to prevent a panic attack. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was an amazing skill. And this is coming from a hypnobirthing class that I thought was phenomenal for anyone that might be having any type of symptoms of anxiety to actually use this.
Yes. And I'm glad that you do bring that up, because it reminds me of one of the other things that I was going to mention. So when you are feeling anxious, one of the first things that you can do is to scale. And so you're going to scale from 0 to 10. 10 is the worst anxiety. 0 is like no anxiety. And then you're going to give it a color. What color is it? And where in your body do you feel it? And what shape is it? Is it round? Is it square? Is it like pond-like, ocean-like? Like, where is it? Because what this does is it gives a client something like visual to look at, and they can slowly start to see like, oh, it's not just anxiety, but it was like the size of a basketball, but now it's the size of a baseball. And so what that does is it gives them an opportunity to notice and be aware that it's slowly shrinking. And it's no longer black, but maybe it's a little bit blue this time. Maybe now it's yellow. So kind of like noticing like that change. And I always tell them like, start off with this, and at the end, you can do this. Like scale it again and see where you are at the end. So that's, yes, I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The other thing is more of a Peter Levine thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Levine, but he does a lot of somatic experiencing. He's like the guru in this, in like EMDR. So one thing I love from him that he talks about is placing your hand on your forehead. So you have, your left hand on your, so you have your palm on your forehead, and you have your right hand on your chest. Okay. And then you just close your eyes, and you're just going to focus on your hand, whether it's warm or cool or sweaty. You're just going to focus on that and how it just holds you, how it contains you, how it just keeps you safe. And that you have your other hand on your heart and just focusing on your heartbeat. And knowing that you are holding on to you, and you are containing yourself, and you have that power, and you are in control. And just focusing on deep breathing. And so you're going to do that for maybe about 5 minutes if you can. And you're just going to just embrace it, embrace yourself, embrace whatever you're feeling, and just focus on that. Just focus on your breath. And so I like that technique because it really calms me, and I feel so contained.
Guys, we actually did this. Like, we were actually doing it, and it calmed me down for a second. I kind of felt it. This is why this girl's, private practice is called Aurenia, because did you guys feel that calmness just a second ago? I felt calm as she was explaining the exercise. I hope that you can practice this, because it is just something so grounding. Like, you are holding yourself, and you're paying attention to your breath and your heartbeat, and it just contains you. I think that's the point, that it contains you for that moment.
Yes, and then another technique that I have is on containment, and is as well, and it's more just like you holding yourself. So you're going to place one hand under like your armpit area, like on the chest, and you're going to place the other one on like cupping your shoulder like this. Yeah, like this.
All right,
and you're just gonna close your eyes, and you're just gonna feel that containment. Like, I am holding me. I am contained. I got me, and I am safe. and just focusing on what you're feeling. And it's about having this connection within yourself, within your body, and being able just to focus on your breathing and feeling your chest just go up and down. And you're going to do that for like 5 minutes as well.
Love.
So those are two great techniques on containment that I love to use with individuals. And the last one I usually use is, again, containment, and it's about, it's having a container. I use this in EMDR a lot. So what you want to do is I have people close their eyes and I tell them to imagine a container. A container, it can be as big as you like, as small as you want, but this has to be a container where you can put all your worries, your fears, your anger, all those negative emotions that you hold. And I want you to imagine it big enough to hold that, and it has to have a two-way system. So either a twist off, you can open and close, it can be a chest, anything, a jar, anything that contain it. And what you want to do is you want to label it. So you want to label it a name, and this name is going to be something that brings you calmness. So it can be like your child's name. It can be a name related to something that you enjoy watching that, that brings you calmness. It can be something like lotus. I love lotus flowers. So maybe just saying that. And so what you're doing is, like, as you close your eyes, you're imagining this container. You're putting all your worries, all your fears. It's in a visualization. You're putting it in there. You're locking it shut. You're snapping it closed, because right now you're not going to deal with it. You're going to wait till you talk to your therapist. You're going to wait till you talk to your friend, your partner, somebody in your life that you're able to reach out to and talk to. And if you don't have anyone else in your life to talk to, then you're going to bring out a journal. And when you're ready, you're going to bring out that journal and you're going to write about all that yuckiness that you're feeling. And then that's going to be your container as well. And you're going to close that. And so it's kind of like you're vomiting all this stuff. And again, it's more about containing. And that gives you that power and the control that you need for yourself. That's often lost when you're feeling anxious.
Yeah. Whenever anyone experiences trauma, you feel powerless, because obviously it is something that was unexpected and it was out of your control.
Exactly.
And I love these exercises because it gives you exactly what you just said, power and control. And it also helps you contain yourself, whatever you're feeling, and paying attention to that. I love everything. Everything that you shared was amazing.
Thank you.
am so blessed to know you, to just to know you, just to be connected to you. I think that I don't even have to watch you live doing what you're doing at Aremia, because I know why you're so overwhelmed with so many clients that are coming to see you, because you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I hope that you guys were able to enjoy what Teresa shared. I want Teresa, can you share your handle, your social handle, so that everyone knows? I want everyone to go and follow Teresa Morales, share all of your platforms, your coaching, your counseling services, and also your podcast.
Yes. So for Instagram, it's at Aremia.counseling. That's IRIMIYA, Aremia.counseling. My business coaching is thrive.aremia. I try to keep this very, similar. Yeah. And then I have journey _of_ a lotus. So you can follow me on that as well. And my website for anybody that's interested is www.aremiacounseling.com.
Yes. And Teresa knows that I was going to be sending clients over her way, and she said, pump the brakes. I cannot see anyone out of California.
Yes.
So it's really unfortunate, because I'm connected to 2 states out here, Georgia and New York.
Yeah.
And I could be clients, girl, but She has to, you know, she's strict. It's like restricted for her to make sure she sees clients in California. So anyone, and I believe I know so many more other people from California, but if you're in California, check this girl out. Please send her referrals if you know any families or any friends, and check out her podcast. She talks about everything trauma. So if you want to continue learning about somatic symptoms and anything that's related to trauma and how to cope through it, that's the podcast to hear. I am honored to have you. I cannot wait. We're going to do this again. We have
we are.
Yes, we have already decided that we're going to be talking about sexual trauma. And so you guys stay tuned for that, because that is coming up and it's going to be here sooner than later. So please tune in. And I appreciate all of you. If this was really sensitive or if it was triggering for anyone, please, there is always a crisis hotline that you can contact. Call any of us. If you have any questions, we can direct you and help you with any additional information. This is Michelle Pintado with Open Door Talk.